The production of this program is made possible thanks to the support of the following and viewers like you. On April 22, 1970, Earth Day kicked off what would become an international movement to protect the environment. 55 years later, the winds of change, especially in North America, appear to be blowing in the opposite direction. In Canada, political leaders appear to have stepped back from the environment in an effort to win votes from the same voters that they were courting not so long ago. Andy Day, the CEO of the BC Parks Foundation, says the earth is where we live, work, and play. This year, more than any in the past 55, it's vitally important for us to renew our commitment to protecting our precious planet. Day says the demand for parks and protected areas is growing. The pressure on wildlife, habitat, traditional uses, infrastructure, and ecosystems is increasing through rising use and threats like pollution and climate change. The most treasured places in our great province need to be supported, or we risk losing what makes British Columbia the beautiful place we all love. I invited Andy Day to join me for a conversation that matters about our need to protect our most glorious heritage, the environment. Andy, welcome.
Thank you, Stu. Pleasure to be here.
It is our most glorious heritage, isn't it?
It is, and it's not only our most glorious heritage in British Columbia, but it is globally a glorious heritage. We have more biodiversity than anywhere else in North America, and in the world's temperate zone, we have, again, just some of the most highest diversity of life, because we have oceans, we have the coastal rainforests, we come across into grasslands, up into the Rocky Mountains, the alpine areas, up to the boreal forests, and then we even have a bit of desert, right? So
yes, we do.
All of those ecosystems have just this incredible diversity of plants, animals, insects, and that is something that is really unique. And BC is it's a real powerhouse.
I have to give credit for that line, glorious heritage. It comes from Teddy Roosevelt.
A great conservationist.
A great conservationist, because he's called the conservationist president, because he actually created the national parks system in the United States for these very reasons. He was worried that we would lose that biodiversity and the dimensions that it brings. And he said it was incumbent upon, citizens in a republic to protect that. How are we doing so far in British Columbia as far as our ability to protect? I mean, we've identified the fact that we've got this remarkably diverse environment, but how are we doing?
Well, right now we're protecting about, let's say, 19% of British Columbia. So about 14.5% is provincial park. That's 1,049 parks. And then we have a couple national parks, we have regional parks, and then we have wildlife management areas, etc. I think that the number that really sticks out to me is that scientists saying for an ecosystem to function, it really needs to have about 30% of it being basically left alone. That's the minimum threshold for it to do things like clean water, produce clean air, good healthy soils, drought and flood mitigation, the pollinators that will pollinate our agricultural systems, etc. So if we develop, beyond that level, it's just that the system no longer functions, doesn't have integrity. It starts to fall apart the way a blanket, the more threads you pull out, isn't going to keep you warm in the winter, right? It's going to just fall into tatters. So that's kind of the minimum. So we've got a ways to go. We've got a ways to go to get to that point. And I think we're on track. We're making progress, and we'll just keep working towards it.
So my initial response to you saying 19% is I'm thinking, well, that's pretty good. Like, it's more than I thought. Like, I didn't think that we were there.
Yeah.
But to go from 19 to 31%, that's more than trying to go from 0 to 19. Like that last 11%.
Yes.
It's a big hurdle.
It's a big, especially in a province where we're a percent is like 1 million hectares. I mean, it's a colossal amount of land. BC is a very large province, so very large part of the world. But And more of this province has linear infrastructure, roads, pipelines, hydro lines, etc., than I think most people realize. When you look at a map and you look for unroaded, wild areas or areas that haven't been touched or impacted, there's not a lot left, right? Nevertheless, it's possible. It is possible. And I think a lot of what makes it possible is thinking about areas that can be restored, and probably more than anything, not thinking that human activity is completely incompatible with natural values. So where we can be a world leader is in forestry, in mining, in ranching, and agriculture, by having those through technology, through innovation, through the kinds of practices that are already in place that have motion but need to be moved forward, making it harmonious for human activity and economic production and natural values. I believe BC can be a world leader in that field.
So those two seem to be competing elements. You're saying that there can be coexistence with human activity.
I'm saying that there not only can be, there has to be. The thought that these two things are opposite, they're in contradiction, they're in conflict, has been part of the British Columbia psyche for quite a while.
Yes.
And the war in the woods, all these things. And it's kind of a a dualistic way of thinking, when the world is not two things. The world is a multiplicity of of different things. And if we just get past this very simplistic way of thinking and we start understanding the complexity of the system, we're working with it, we can produce tremendous wealth and retain the tremendous natural wealth that we have. Absolutely.
The production of this program is made possible thanks to the support of the following and viewers like you. So, because I want to talk to you about what are some of the barriers to you being able to sort of achieve your aspirational goal of 30% of the province being protected. Is one of them the way that and I just demonstrated that maybe my thinking is out of date?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, thought first, then
action. Yeah.
And if our thinking is heading in this direction of either or, then we will always be, politicians change, and then now you're going in this direction, then you're going in this direction, and now you're trying to save this, and then you're plowing this down. And ecosystems don't work when you go, we're going to draw a little circle around that, and that's going to be protected, and everything around it we're going to just like flatten.
Right.
It doesn't work.
Yeah. It's an arbitrary boundary that's man-made.
Yeah. And so even that conception of what conservation is and protection is, that has to change. Like, people in that whole movement need to start thinking less about putting bubbles on things and more about the whole landscape and working landscapes, and how we don't think of, again, resource industries as like your opponent or something, right? I mean, it's crazy thinking. People in resource industries are land people. Geologists love rocks and love the earth, right? And foresters love forests and trees. And we just have to, again, get past this very simplistic, dualistic thinking and move to places where, we're saying to companies like, okay, like, how do we retain wildlife values? How do we, stop invasive species? How do we respond to climate? We need all our heads together. We need all our technology together, our energy together, to deal with the challenges that we have in front of us.
You're reminding me of an interesting experience I had a number of years ago. I was up at a run-of-river operation, both when it was being constructed, so there's a construction camp in there and there's lots of human activity, and then I was there when they commissioned it, or were about to commission it, and there were maybe only 3 humans there, me and the 2 people who were there sort of signing off that they were going to commission this. When the camp was there wasn't much of a sign of wildlife, like right there where the powerhouse was. But when we went back for the commissioning, I saw 3 deer and a wide variety of other critters all roaming around. They didn't care that it was there, and you were right. There was no further disturbance to them, and they were able to live quite comfortably next door to this run-of-river power station.
Yeah, and not only that, if it was designed and done in a way that actually enhanced their habitat.
Yeah.
Right, which is possible. Like we are starting to, humans aren't really smart enough to know how smart nature is yet.
Right.
But we're starting to get there in the sense of, understanding some of the ways that nature functions and what nature needs. And so if you give it half a chance, it will do the rest. You just have to give it that starter or put those things in place. And then the animals are like, oh, you put up bird boxes and stuff, birds will come. Right? You
Right.
build a nest, they will come. So again, it's just, but you have to put your attention in that direction. You have to, value that thing and not take it for granted.
So let's say we can get enough people to embrace this idea of cohabitation. You can have a park and you can also have human use that meets many of our societal goals. What's the next biggest challenge for you in being able to do this expansion from 19 to 30%?
Well, and that's just, that's one aspect. I think there's a lot around challenges like invasive species, like climate, that are, and pollution, chemical pollution, persistent pollution, plastics, those kinds of things, right?
Yeah.
No end of challenges, and we're not going to snap our fingers and turn those around.
No.
Development is, alteration of habitat is, by and large, one of the biggest direct impacts when you permanently knock down a place, pave it, as we are doing, particularly in our urban areas, particularly on, coastlines, the most high quality habitats, right, where the animals want to be. They want to go down to the lake and drink. But the whole lakefront's covered in
Right.
big houses, right? But again, we just can't. We know will be continued human needs, and we just have to find ways to set aside areas, and for when we're addressing human needs, that we're incorporating ecological values into those things, the way we build our houses, the amount of permeable ground, all of that stuff is possible, right? It's possible. We just need people to believe, and we need the technologies to develop. So again, I think we can invest in those technologies, invest in the new building techniques, et cetera, and we will start to see then not only benefits at home, but global export of those kinds of innovations.
The production of this program is made possible thanks to the support of the following and viewers like you. So who's responsible for creating these new parklands? Is it going to be government, or is it going to be a combination of government and, like the Parks Foundation working together? And so then how do you do that? Do you have to buy property and give it that designation? Like, I don't quite understand the mechanism, because up till now I've always sort of thought, well, I remember when Mike Harcourt was premier, he came along and said, okay, we're protecting this area. And it was, you go, okay, that's a remarkable statement by government, and they can protect it, and they can protect it under law. But what's the mechanism that's available to us now going forward? Is it incumbent upon government?
It's a combination. So 5% of British Columbia is private land, and 95% is Crown and Indigenous land. And the 5% is largely in the high value biodiversity areas, because it is waterfronts and estuaries and valley bottoms, rich valley bottoms, et cetera. So we do raise funding, private funding, with some federal support so far, in purchasing private lands that are highly valuable. We'll continue to do that. That's an important pathway.
Is that to ensure that we have parklands that are in much closer to urban areas rather than just rural?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. That are, they're high value ecologically, but they're also important for recreation, all those reasons. So that's going to be one component of it. And again, it's not so much the quantity there, it's the quality of it to humans and to species. And then you got the other 95%. And that's largely going to occur through discussions between Indigenous people, government, resource industries, communities, working together to identify the areas there that are going to be important for conservation, but also the areas that are important for mining or forestry, et cetera, right? And most nations in this province, most First Nations in this province, have a kind of a more holistic view of their territories, in the sense of, we want some working landscapes, and it again, these things can be compatible. There is that sense of humans working in coexisting with nature, not this polarity. And so I think we'll see, more interest and continued interest from nations, and also from resource industries who are trying to find some certainty and security, like where can we operate, right? And then from governments as well, who are trying to, again, provide a pathway to critical minerals, right? Provide very important benefits and revenues to fund all of the things that are in the provincial budget or the federal budget, but also see that they're responsible for, mitigating climate and for preserving wildlife and biodiversity values.
So as you tell me that, I think, okay, that's tricky negotiation, because you've got competing interests, competing jurisdictions, and so on. What role does the Parks Foundation BC play in helping to make that happen?
So we bring funding to the table as our main the value that we're putting into the mix. But we also, I think, because of the mindset and the mentality that I was talking about earlier, are talking to industry and saying, what are some ways that you can improve your practices or whatever to be in line with, or what are some ways, we talk to conservation groups, what are some ways that we can reconceptualize what conservation is, and talking to governments. So a lot of it's saying, what is this pathway that looks like coexistence, and how can we be a force around that? But I think coming back to your original part of your question is kind of like who, it's really about the community of British Columbians that is going to make this happen. We can't rely on governments to do things, we can't rely on companies to do, like everybody has a role to play. It just as much as we're talking about ecosystems where everything has a role, that the human community is very much an ecosystem. And it's the way we work together and the way we understand who we are as British Columbians is as much a threat as these places, because our identity is so tied to these places, that will bring us together, and that will establish a culture of working together, a culture of stewardship, and a culture of innovation. That's really, that's how this is going to work. It's not, we're just one part of this puzzle, right? And when we bring something important, I think, money's one thing. I think the most important thing that we can do is leadership, is thought leadership, and taking that thought leadership and turning it into concrete action, concrete examples, demonstrations, celebrating the stories where companies and governments are doing good things, where First Nations are doing good things, celebrating people working together, sharing those stories. That's what's going to drive BC to retain its identity and to retain the lands and waters and air and soil that makes us who we are.
The production of this program is made possible thanks to the support of the following and viewers like you. So, are you an NGO? Or are you
We are.
We're
a charitable foundation, yeah, public charitable foundation.
And so what gives you kind of the credibility or authority to speak to all of these different levels? Like, what is kind of the weight of the organization, the experts that you bring to the table that make different, competing entities at times, and the general public say, okay, you're coming to me with the kind of credibility that convinces me I want to get behind you?
Yeah. Part of that credibility is who we are. So if you look at our board, it's, we have Ross Beatty, who's, one of the world's most successful business people in the mining realm, but also in the renewable energy realm. And he's also, one of Canada's largest conservation philanthropists. We have people like Dan Johnson, who's been a mediator for some of the largest, deals between forest and government and right? Just an incredible board of leaders who I think exemplify the coexistence, right? They're not sort of like just someone you can put in a box. Right? They're
kind of like you can't put the environment in a box, right?
Yeah, they're very strategic thinkers and they're very accomplished. Their track records, so that's huge, right? And then secondly, so there's who we are, but then there's the track record that we've had. So in the last 6 years, really, 2018, so let's say 6.5 years since we started, we have protected over 75 places in this province, largely through crowdfunding, through all British Columbians coming together around places they love. We've encouraged British Columbians to go out and take photos of nature to collect observations, and now British Columbia is over 30 million observations, 60,000 people out as community scientists.
Citizen scientists,
right? And that number was 20,000 5 years ago.
Wow.
I mean, so that's tripled. We've created a park prescription program. We've worked with physicians first in BC and now all across the country, prescribing time in nature to improve people's mental and physical health and to bring down healthcare costs. So we've just, and we've engaged, over 250,000 British Columbians a year in parks, educating, stewardship, having fun, enjoyment. And I think just that combined, the fact that we don't think of this as our organization. I'm not saying that we accomplish those things. I'm saying the community that I was talking about, of British Columbians have accomplished those things. We've helped facilitate the flow through of people's energy and resources and money, but they've done it.
Yeah.
And that's what we wanted from the beginning. We didn't want to build a big old yard, do all that stuff. We wanted to empower people to celebrate their success and to be grateful in a spirit of gratitude for where we live and for being British Columbia.
So last quick question before we're out of time. Volunteers, are they welcome?
Volunteers are the heart of what we do.
Yeah.
They're the heart of what we do. And there are just, hundreds of clubs across this province, outdoor clubs and naturalist clubs and, wildlife. And they are out there, they're building trails, they're fixing, huts and bridges, they're making observations, and they're the land people, right? And they know their stuff, and they're also people in business. Our board members are incredibly busy people who volunteer all their time. Wow.
Well, I applaud what you're doing, and I will be celebrating as you move forward towards your goal. Thanks for your time today.
Thank you, Stu. It's I think it's a celebration for all British Columbians and for British Columbia. Just what's being accomplished. It's phenomenal.
I agree.